On today's episode of
Oh, shit. Steve Pitt. All right, let's start over. I forgot I said that part. All right, ready?
Yeah. On today's episode of
The SIVA papers.
we'll be chatting about Executive Order 14241.
And I think that's called the Immediate Measures to Increase American Mineral Production.
Awesome. On today's episode of the civic papers, like we said, we'll be chatting about Executive Order 14241, in which the government hit go on what could become the next American gold rush. But this time it's not gold. It's things like lithium, nickel, and other rare earth metals. This executive order is the government's move to boost U.S. mineral production pretty fast, or relatively fast. It's about cutting our dependence on other countries for stuff that powers everything from, our phones to military jets, or military planes rather. But honestly, I think I'm going a bit too far. So let's back up and kind of ask, do we mine minerals in the U.S.?
I have never mined a mineral in my life.
Well, I think we do. We probably do, realistically. But like Ackeem said in episode 1, we're not necessarily investigative journalists. But we do know for sure that the U.S. at some point, some entities have mined minerals, because I think in 2022 we produced about $98 billion worth of non-fuel minerals, and that includes gold, copper, zinc, crushed stone, and other rare earth metals. But when it comes to critical minerals like lithium, cobalt, and other rare earths, we're still relying mostly on other countries. Right now, China dominates in rare earth. The DRC leads in cobalt. Russia, South Africa, and a couple of other countries can control the flow of most key minerals. And this executive order matters because minerals are the foundation of clean energy. A lot of the tech products that we have, whether it's from, a smart fridge all the way to your smartphone, as well as national defense.
So then, I'm going to float an idea for us, because there's a couple things in this executive order that brought some things to light, like the Mining Act of 1872. So we could technically, the United States allows, citizens to claim federal lands for mining purposes. So if we wanted to switch over and go out and probably, find some minerals, now that I know that they're readily available in the U.S. But yeah, that's just one of the interesting things. But then they followed up in here with the Federal Land Policy and Management Act, which states that the federal land should remain under federal ownership. So I am not completely sure how we go claim land, but then they keep it owner. But maybe we lease it. But hey, that's something that, again, we can, or anyone interested in going out and putting a stake in some federal lands for some mining can go out and do. But yeah, it jam-packed with great information for this executive order. I would advise people to kind of take a deep dive if they're really interested in this concept. Like, something that I didn't know about was the National Energy Dominance Council. And it was established by another executive order. Basically, they took a point on, I don't know. I don't even know how to say this, under the name establishing the National Energy Dominance Council is the executive order. And we can probably do a follow-up episode on that. But the chair of those councils were the Secretary of Interior, which we always like to tell you who these people are, which is Doug Burgum. And again, if I say these names wrong, I apologize. I'm just reading them as I see them. And the Secretary of Energy, which is Chris Wright. That's one interesting thing that I saw from this act. And then, another one was the fact that it named a lot of prior legislation that, build off, even other presidencies going back to Obama in 2015, where it was like fixing America's Surface Transportation Act, which is dubbed the FAST Act, which authorized 300 billion over a couple of years for highway and motor vehicle safety. So just looking at that, and I already talked about the Mining Act of 1872, and then the Mineral Act that I talked about earlier. It just goes to show how legislation and laws kind of build on each other to help create new processes and new opportunities. And speaking of new opportunities, something that I thought was specifically interesting what they utilize in this, and even, Joe Biden and Donald Trump in his first term used it, was the Defense Production Act, which is a Cold War era law that gives a president emergency authority to control domestic industries. So President Trump and President Biden invoked it during, COVID-19, and I think Trump used it for medical supplies and Biden used it for vaccine production. And I think this term, Trump is using it for this mineral push to counter China's near total control over the sector, as Jermaine kind of mentioned before. So that's something interesting that they also brought up in here as well, and noted a good couple of, how do I say this, appointed and elected officials, mostly appointed, that would be a part of it. So people to look out for is like the Office of Legislative Affairs, but they don't really have a director from what I was able to find. They have multiple special assistants to the president, but James Blair is the White House Deputy Chief of Staff that they report to, those special assistants. Then you have your Secretary Interior again, Doug Burgum, and then your Assistant to the President for Economic Policy, Ryan Batch, and then Assistant to the President for National Security Affairs, which I believe was another individual, but recently Marco Rubio is acting in that position. And then the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth.
I think Hegseth.
There we go.
I know because of the news. He
Yes.
seems to be very active
figure. I knew I heard the name before. I just couldn't put the name, like the pronunciation. Like I know the name. I knew it was Pete something. Then you had Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Leslie Rollins, and then Administrator of the Small Business Administration, Kelly Loeffler. Yeah, so that's a couple of interesting points I wanted to bring up from the order that just, continues to show the interconnectivity between the different components of government and how they all work together. And being aware of them can really create opportunities, create awareness, and help, people drive things forward.
I'm solid, man. But kind of thinking about what you said, I remember the story in a place obviously that's special to us because we founded our company in the state of Maine. Remember the lithium deposit that we learned about a couple years back. So kind of looked more into that. And that lithium deposit is apparently worth $1.5 billion. And to the audience, lithium is typically used for like EV batteries, energy storage, renewable infrastructure. So U.S. currently produces less than 2% of global lithium, mostly from one Nevada mine. Nevada's on the West Coast for those who don't know what geography. So this is pretty big for Maine. But one of the issues is that Maine has one of the strictest mining laws in terms of states for the entire U.S. And essentially it's banned for open pit mining for any metal mines over 3 acres. So there's a couple who owns property who pretty much has this lithium deposit on their property. And according to the Maine state law, they're not necessarily able to mine it. So I'm not sure what's going to be that process, but I'm pretty sure when you got minerals worth $1.5 billion and this new executive order kind of pushing for domestic mining, I could definitely see that being investigated. Not as a crime, but investigated for people to start mining and figure out how they can get that 1.5 billion out of the ground.
No, 100%. So would it be, I guess, feasible then if they sold the land to themselves at 3 acre increments, they would have multiple mines and not fall? They should be fine.
That'd be pretty interesting. The only thing I don't know is like when it comes to mining, even though the state law in Maine says you can't mine over a 3 acre property, like what does that look like? How many acres do you need to dig into to, I guess, find the lithium? Like,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like just that process. Is it kind of like plants? Do you just start digging and whatever you find, that's what it is? Or is there like a whole process, kind of like a casino when you win, you get the chips, you got to cash out, but then you got to actually report what you cashed out on. So that part is kind of interesting. I think we have yet to see the true impact of this order yet. So I'd imagine probably in like the next 5 to 10 years or so, we'll start seeing like what would it look like and what lands could be seized under the banner of let's produce more or let's have more minerals and control more of the mineral kind of flow, because there's always two sides to each law.
Yeah, definitely. And as you know, even mentioning here, the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, their whole mandate is to kind of protect conserve and protecting their federal lands. So it's like interesting seeing that, how they're going to navigate this increased usage for mineral production. While also, one thing that's come to my mind, maybe as a startup founder and maybe opportunist, is like, if I go out and I dig and I find a mineral, who do I tell this to? Who's the person I have to report this to, and how do I keep most of it tonight? Like, should I go straight to the federal government and skip the state? So that's one thing it didn't say. It said we're trying to increase, but maybe there's some additional.
That is interesting, because it's like what takes precedent? Because even in his main case with the executive order, does that supersede Maine state law, and can people start digging for that lithium deposit? Dang, that's a great question. Like, what if you find a little gold? You know what I mean? Do you say something, or do you just start digging? What would you do? Would you just start digging, or would you just be like,
I'm gonna wait until the courts answer the main case before I say what I would do. I'm gonna wait for my answer for that.
But no, I think this could be interesting, because obviously I think this could provide opportunities to create new jobs, but it also creates opportunities for like, what's the impact, the continuous impact of like drilling in earth, like deeper and deeper and deeper. And, you know, that's why I said like 5 to 10 years, we'll see kind of the fallout of it. But I think it's definitely something people should pay attention to. Hence why we wanted to talk about it today.
Definitely. My advice to Ryan, the assistant to the president for economic policy, because I can't say his last name, is Bash. Maybe Ryan Bash. If you ever end up watching this, you guys should come up with an incentive program where you give people $20K to go mine for 6 months. I'll go do it. I'll go search for minerals if you guys throw out a quick incentive.
Yeah, man, it'll be like them old Western movies when they
Exactly
like the gold rush.
The story goes back to 1848. James was building a sawmill for John Sutter when he saw something shining in the river. They both tested the metal. It was gold.
I ain't gonna lie, man, them people be looking hurt, beat down. I'll pass. I'm like, bro, we ain't got no robots.
And I send a drone over to fly over and start scanning. But hey, man, you see me out there, I'll navigate a drone and walk through the.
Yeah, no, for sure. But this is one of them things where we'll like, I think it'd be beneficial for us as a platform to like build this into like, you know, later stage app development of like showing people the ramifications. Like that'd be kind of cool. Like it'll like the law pop up, and then it'll be like maybe a couple points of how this potentially could affect
Right.
you. I think that'd be cool, because it's one thing, you know, like when people read these policies and stuff like that, and it's like probably the first question that pops up is like, how does this impact me? And
Exactly.
you know, hence the civic papers.